So this is the OnePlus NORD, and it might be OnePlus's most well-known phone ever. For a brand like OnePlus, it marked a change in the pathway for them. Instead of the typical flagship killer that they've done time and time again, OnePlus made this a mid-range killer. And I guess this phone gives you the vast majority of what a flagship needs, like a great screen, a great software experience, solid performance, and even 5G, all while stripping back just a few small areas. And the end result is one pretty great smartphone. And now that it's 2021 and the hype around this device has died down, it's time to consider if this is the mid-range phone to buy, or if offerings from brands like Google and Samsung are better choices in the long term. But before we get to that, if you're a part of the 93% of people who aren't subscribed to these videos, then let's change that now so you never miss out on a future video. Also, if you'd like to join a channel Discord, then let me know and I might consider starting one. When it comes to the design, there's nothing about the OnePlus NORD that says cheap. I mean, seeing glass on a phone of this price range is rare enough as it is, but to have such a nice glow to the reflections and a curve to the edges that leads perfectly to the frame, there's a really great design to this phone overall. Although the frame of this phone is plastic, it doesn't feel bad by any means. I haven't noticed in the past couple of months that this phone is plastic. Every time I pick it up, it feels so nice in the hand, you genuinely don't notice, and if anything, it counts towards its durability. There is something about the materials, the colours, and the overall design choices that works so nicely with this phone. From the sleek minimal curves around the back to the flat display and the perfect placement of the buttons, the camera, and other design flares, there's not much more I could ask for from this phone's design. The display of the OnePlus NORD is pretty incredible. So it's a 6.44-inch 90Hz OLED with HDR10+ certification, a 20:9 aspect ratio. All specs aside for a second, it is a really great screen to use, especially when you consider the price tag of this phone. Being a completely flat panel and having a great brightness range, I find using this display is an absolute breeze. I often consume content on my phone on a daily basis, and with this phone I find things look pretty good. There's a nice pop to the dynamic range and a very immersive viewing experience overall, and although the colours aren't the most accurate and they tend to favour the warmer temperatures, I can look past that for the price. It's possible that this is caused by the infamous green tint that you can see at lower brightnesses, which does in itself kind of ruin the display experience for me at times, particularly at night. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty great display, and despite some minor issues at low brightness, I have found that I really enjoy using this display in everyday life, and I've never really thought of this display as a cheap or a subpar panel. It might not be quite as nice as the perfected one on the Pixel 5, which is one of the nicest displays I've used in a while, but it's still pretty damn good for the price. It's been argued for a long time by myself and a number of other YouTubers that OxygenOS is one of the best revisions of Android out there, and there's a few reasons why. Firstly, OxygenOS is simple, but it doesn't lack any features at all. Actually, OxygenOS feels like one of the most feature-rich versions of Android out there, which covers every single angle in a technically and visually pleasing way. Customization is at the core of OxygenOS, and you can choose your own ambient display clock styles from a wide range of options, customize your fingerprint scanner animations, fonts and system icon packs, system-wide accent colors, including themes for how the accent color is displayed, and even the shape of the system icons. Because of this, the combinations for how you can make this phone look are virtually endless, and it's one of the things that makes OxygenOS feel more like it's really yours. As well as being visually great, OxygenOS is also an incredibly speedy software, and it makes full use of the available hardware in a way that seems almost impossible on this phone. So this phone has a Snapdragon 765G, that's the same CPU as the Pixel 5. It is not a flagship tier chip, but it sure as hell performs like one most of the time. Paired with my unit's 12GB of RAM, performance is absolutely incredible for my use case. I'm no power user, but for everyday use where online shopping is mixed with social media and entertainment, there's only rare moments of lag dispersed within an otherwise incredible experience. The app loading speeds, the flow of multitasking, everything is pretty incredible considering the price tag of this phone. And these animations happen quickly without any struggling or any noticeable stutters. Even for gaming, in apps like PUBG and Fortnite, they run pretty nicely on this phone and keep a decent frame rate throughout. It's not something you would expect from a mid-tier chip. Although the performance is great when you think of it relative to the price, that doesn't mean that this phone is going to be better than a flagship CPU that you could see in something like the OnePlus 8. As I say, there's small moments where this phone will hang or the animations will jitter, but for under £400, it's hard to get better performance at this price point. Going into the long term, the performance of this phone will hold up pretty well in my opinion. There's nothing groundbreaking here for sure, but it holds up pretty well now even though it's 6 months old. And given how good OnePlus's track record of software is, we should see software updates on this phone for at least the next 2 or so years. Now, although there's a lot of incredibly good things here on this phone, the cameras are one of the areas that it starts to slip a little bit, but not in the way that you expect. First of all, there's only 3 cameras here, not 4. The 4th one is a depth sensor that can be used for better portrait photos. Now sure, this being advertised as a 4th camera is a bit misleading, but it does provide a benefit to your portrait photos, so I will take it. As for the other cameras, the main 48 megapixel sensor and the ultra-wide cameras are pretty good, and they're definitely passable as what is usually considered to be a good smartphone camera. Colours look natural enough with a nice warmth to most of the images, and there's nothing too oversaturated or heavily processed here. The images overall are pretty natural looking, even if they don't pop too much. What's really great is that you can shoot RAW directly from the stock camera app in Pro mode. That allows you to get custom shutter speeds, ISO levels, and even manual focusing without any third-party software. And the flexibility of the RAW files is really something to appreciate for anyone who is into photography. But once you cover those 2 cameras, that's when things start to get a little bit worse. The 2 megapixel macro camera is honestly one of the worst things I have ever seen, and it doesn't even make sense to have it. Apart from being, well, 2 megapixels, it's just simply too wide and too horrible looking to be used as a macro camera, or even to get an image to be happy with. What makes it even weirder is the fact that the 2x telephoto mode, which is a digital crop on the 48 megapixel sensor, looks great, and it gets some pretty incredible macro photos. In fact, that's all I've used to do macro photos with this phone. I've used the 2 megapixel one only to show how bad it is. So steer clear of the ultra macro because it really isn't a feature to brag about. Now, I know I've been harsh on the ultra macro, but I really do like the other cameras a lot. In fact, this was my primary phone for most of the summer, and that's where all of these pictures that I'm showing you now actually came from. For a phone in this price range, I think the cameras outperform its class, especially when you consider the flexibility of the focal lengths, which a phone like the Pixel 4a just can't match. The battery life that the OnePlus NORD offers is also pretty impressive. For a full day's use at a decent brightness and with 90Hz always on, I can get 4 to 4.5 hours of screen on time before needing to recharge. That's pretty average for a smartphone for me, but if you disable 90Hz and instead use 60Hz, your battery life can be extended massively. So I looked at the Pixel 5 recently, and that is a great phone with some top-of-the-line cameras, a software experience that feels perfect from stock, but the OnePlus NORD, well, that's just over half the price of the Pixel 5. And for that money, it's hard to get a better experience from both the hardware and the software from a smartphone. For everything the OnePlus NORD removed with its plastic frame and the minor screen issues, it didn't remove the OnePlus DNA. The idea that a phone doesn't have to break the bank to give you everything you need and then some. This phone, the OnePlus NORD, might have just been the best value smartphone in 2020, and in 2021, that really hasn't changed for me. See, if you're in the market for a phone at this price point, then there's not anything that can really become quite as close to perfect as this. Sure, the Pixel 4a is a great option, but it only has a Snapdragon 730G with no 5G and only 1 camera instead of 3. It's hard to think of a better phone than this for a budget of this size. I think this phone is truly incredible for everything that it gives you, even now, 6 months later, in 2021.